This is a road trip that begins at my birthplace in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, and continues down Route 66 to Albuquerque, New Mexico. One of my Neumannisms is that all great art is personal, and that all great art is about something. So this is really a story about me. The art I make is about my life. It's about my unique personal experience. It so happens that a whole generation of post-World War II babies have shared similar experiences. So, while the work is about me, it's also about the collective memories of an entire generation of Americans. It's not insignificant that I was born right in the middle of this country. So this is a road trip that begins at my birthplace in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. What could be more American than football? Although I was never cut out to be a football player, football would play a major role in my childhood. My dad was from working-class German stock, raised across the river from New York City in New Jersey. Like millions of World War II vets, he was able to go to college thanks to the GI Bill. He went to Springfield College, where he earned his master's degree in physical education. It was there that he met Priscilla Armour, who was then working as a secretary at the college. They were married in Springfield in 1951 and immediately set off for Iowa, where Dad had enrolled in the doctoral program of physical education at the University of Iowa. Mom worked in the law library there as Dad pursued his studies and worked part-time coaching various sports in the athletic department at nearby Coe College. By the time I came along in 1953, Dad had accepted a full-time position as assistant football coach at Coe. Dad is kneeling in the lower left of this photo. Standing at the far right is another assistant coach at Coe, a Harvard grad named Marv Levy. The inspiration for my art began on America's two lanes. After an undefeated season in 1956, Marv secured a job as head football coach at the University of New Mexico in Albuquerque. This was the reason for my first road trip. Marv recruited Dad to be his first assistant. Pop packed his young family in the 39 Oldsmobile, and we headed for Albuquerque down Route 66. I'm sure you've tried the interesting exercise of trying to recall your earliest memories. Psychologists say that most of us cannot remember much that happened before the age of 4. Some of the earliest recollections that I can pull from the far corners of my gray matter have to do with automobile travel. I can remember the musty smell of the baked dry car upholstery as I dozed in the back seat of Dad's 1939 Oldsmobile, watching the telephone poles fly by the window. I was 3. The Neumann family was driving west from Cedar Rapids to Albuquerque when on a Friday afternoon, the Olds broke down just outside of Tucumcari. I don't remember what Route 66 motel we stayed at, but we wound up staying there for the weekend. Dad got the car fixed, but the repair shop wouldn't take his out-of-state check. Dad didn't have the cash to pay for the repairs, so we had to wait until Monday when he was able to call the University of New Mexico and have his new employer advance him some money via Western Union to get the car out of the shop and allow us to complete the trip to Albuquerque. My formative years in Albuquerque were brief, but they left an indelible impression on me. This was where I became aware of the world, and my first memories were created. Route 66, Central Avenue in Albuquerque, was the gateway to the city. At night, it was a kaleidoscope of neon motel signs, welcoming motorists with a riot of animated color and light. evocative names like the Tiwa Lodge, the Thunderbird, the El Don, the Aztec, and the Desert Sands beckoned weary travelers on a Western adventure. Many of these are still there, albeit in various states of repair or disrepair. In the 1950s heyday of these places, I was a wide-eyed kid with an imagination fueled by John Wayne Westerns and curio shop rubber tomahawks, and I still like to wear Western shirts. My life and my art have been a journey of discovery on the road. A few unexpected turns along the way led me to some new destination. After attending first grade at Zuni School, I was off again on another long road trip heading west on 66. In 1960, after a successful few years at University of New Mexico, Coach Levy was recruited as head coach at University of California, Berkeley, and again, he took my father with him. Dad bought a push-button transmission Plymouth station wagon to accommodate his growing family, which by this time included my sister Sandy. She was born in Albuquerque and was named after the Sandia Mountains. Memories of this trip are much more vivid. Mom's homemade lunches packed with a block of ice in the aluminum cooler were enjoyed at scenic desert rest stops. Burma shave signs, roadrunners, and jackrabbits added to the magnificent southwestern vistas whizzing by the outside of the rear-facing back seat of the station wagon. There was the treat of stops at places like the Painted Desert and the Petrified Forest in Arizona. But one of the real highlights for this 6-year-old budding artist was the novelty of those Western motels. I remember being fascinated by the glassine-wrapped water glasses, the crinkly paper printed with the reassuring words, "Sanitized for your protection." There were beds with vibrating mattresses where you could get an electric massage for the drop of a coin. Darkness overtook us as we approached our California destination. After driving for hours across the pitch-black emptiness of the Mojave Desert, the welcoming neon sign of a motel in Needles, California, was a great comfort. Inside the motel's tiny tiled bathroom, I was half frightened and intrigued by the discovery of a glowing ultraviolet tube ringing the underside of the toilet seat. There were those words again, "Sanitized for your protection." This was truly the modern age. California was great fun for me. It was there that for my 7th birthday I received my first two-wheeled bicycle. The black Schwinn Speedster became my ticket to freedom and mobility for years to come and spawned my lifelong love affair with two-wheeled travel. We moved into our second brand new ranch house. The first one had a view of the majestic Sandia Mountains in Albuquerque. This one was in the shadow of Mount Diablo in Walnut Creek. While coaching football for the Cal Bears, Dad took me to all the home games as the team's water boy, where I was in charge of distributing quarter-sliced oranges, towels, water, and ice to the players on the bench. I even got the privilege of catching the extra point kicks behind the goalposts. This was in Cal's magnificent Bowl Stadium in front of 60,000 cheering fans. I loved the fact that I was sharing a small part of the spotlight with my father's team. I had the coolest dad in the world. In 1963, the Neumann family was again heading down Route 66, this time going east back to New Mexico. Dad had found a new position as Director of Athletics and head football coach at New Mexico Military Institute in Roswell. Once again, Pop bought a new station wagon for the trip. The new Ford Fairlane was loaded up with Mom, Sis, my baby brother Chris, recently born in Walnut Creek, Dodie, our German Shepherd, me, and Mom's roadside meals in the ice chest. This led to more southwestern motels and road trip adventures that inspired this young artist. That was the year that I got my first harmonica. It turned out that I was a much better harmonica player than a baseball player. That same year, in 1964, I saw the Beatles and the Rolling Stones on the Ed Sullivan television show. I loved Roswell, but our stay there was brief. By the summer of 1965, the family was on the road again. This time, we were headed to Massachusetts, where Dad had accepted a football coaching position at Springfield College, his alma mater, and eventually mine too. This trip was like the Route 66 Nat King Cole classic song in reverse. Amarillo, Oklahoma City, Joplin, Missouri, St. Louis. In a St. Louis motel parking lot, our car was broken into and most of our clothing was stolen. From that day on, I've never been that fond of St. Louis. By the mid-1960s, the Neumanns had moved to Massachusetts, where I graduated from East Longmeadow High School in 1972. The tumultuous times of the late 60s and early 70s and my artist nature found me caught up in the hippie culture of the day. I was developing my harmonica chops and singing in a garage band called The Ardent Rain. So why do I paint motels? By the time I was 12, I had attended 4 different elementary schools, motored coast to coast, seen a big swath of America via 2-lane highways, and stayed in lots of motels. For over 20 years of my adult life, I had jobs that involved extensive travel. I've slept in motel or hotel rooms in most of the lower 48 states, Canada, Mexico, Italy, Monaco, France, Switzerland, the Netherlands, Germany, and the United Kingdom. I'm interested in images that evoke a feeling in the viewer. Images of motels are loaded with emotional content, different for each viewer depending on their personal experience. One of the feelings that motels can evoke is the excitement of road tripping. The great adventure of automobile tourism, which boomed in the post-World War II era, was part of the collective psyche of my generation. Our fathers took the family on Sunday drives. We read Kerouac, we listened to rock and roll, and we built hot rod cars. My love of rolling down the road on 2 wheels began at age 7 and continues to this day. Touring by bicycle allows one to experience the land kinesthetically, while at the same time allowing one to see much more than is possible by car. When I go for a bike ride, I feel like I want to visually drink in the landscape. Touring Italy by bicycle in September of 1976 was certainly one of the most memorable experiences of my lifetime. In addition to the physical challenges of alpine passes, I had the inspirational experience of seeing the works of the Renaissance masters in person. While my paintings are of subjects from my lifetime, the oil painting techniques that I employ date back to the days of Michelangelo and Caravaggio. After my journey in Italy, I traded in my bicycle wheels for motorcycle wheels, where I discovered the American open road during my Bronson years in the 1980s. The subjects of my art are inextricably linked to automobile travel. I was born during the Eisenhower years, and my generation came of age during the construction of America's massive interstate highway system. It was this new way of travel that was largely responsible for the decline of all the roadside establishments that formerly welcomed travelers along the 2-lane highways passing through small towns across the nation. The days of cruising in a big V8 were coming to a close. By the 1970s, we were beginning to pay the price for our unbridled consumption of fossil fuel. As much as I am aware of the necessity and inevitability of change, there is something about sailing along in a large, plush, and powerful convertible that I miss. I'm glad I was once able to experience that ride. Automobile culture is intrinsically part of the places I paint. As our culture changes, the commercial landscape will also change. Ah, the romance of the Great American Road. There's nothing like starting the day with a clean windshield and a full tank of gas. There is the welcoming warm glow of a neon motel sign at the end of a long day on the road, like comfort food for the soul. But there is also the melancholy of the endless passage of vapid advertising on rusting sign. There can be a kind of emptiness in prolonged solo travel, like the listless feeling of a lonesome salesman watching Wheel of Fortune in a rundown motel room, alone and miles from home. Although I'm making art that has a significant aspect of nostalgia, nostalgia for the good old days is not the subject of my art. I'm not interested in painting a happy days cliché of roadside America. I'm painting subjects as I find them today. The element of the passage of time is in there. I'm also trying to depict something more complex, which is the dual nature of the American experience. The American dream was far from an equal opportunity construct. However, the civil rights movement and rock and roll music had begun to break down barriers. The Rolling Stones introduced American kids to muddy waters. In the 60s, I was listening to KRSY, Roswell, New Mexico, on my turquoise blue pocket transistor radio. The playlist was Top 40, which in Roswell at that time included Buck Owens and the Buckaroos, the Beatles, Elvis, the Beach Boys, and Roy Orbison. I was turned on by the sounds of twangy guitars and rock and roll beats. When I was 12, I ordered a Hohner Civil War Centennial Model 1865 Marine Band harmonica from an ad in Boy's Life magazine with $2 I had saved for. It came with instructions on how to play When Johnny Comes Marching Home, The Yellow Rose of Texas, and other Civil War songs, which I learned to play. I also learned to play the harmonica parts to the Beatles' Love Me Do, the Rolling Stones' Not Fade Away, and other hits of the day crackling from that blue-green transistor. By the time I was a teenager, I was able to hear John Lee Hooker and Little Walter played equally along with Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin, and Otis Redding, thanks to what was then called underground radio. Hippies had taken over the FM dial in Springfield, Massachusetts. My harmonica playing evolved, as did my knowledge of American music. Memphis soul, Chicago blues, and Southern rock gave me the inspiration to blow. Later on, as a DJ on Springfield College's radio station, I was able to discover a treasure trove of music on the college's extensive library of great jazz on vinyl. My love for American roots music has provided me with subjects for my paintings, introduced me to some wonderful people, taken me to fascinating places, and provided the soundtrack for my life. My love of music has not only enriched my ears, but also provided me with some memorable images. I'm interested in making art that speaks of place, the power of place to create a feeling or tell a story. I like to think that I'm making art with images that have the power to communicate emotion. The places we inhabit tell a story of who we are and who we were. Like most young artists graduating with a degree in fine art, the need for legal tender caused me to take on a wide range of jobs. I was a disc jockey on radio and in nightclubs, a cycling coach, a roller coaster operator, and a fence erector, among many other short-lived occupations. I worked in advertising as a designer and art director, which led me to a career in the fine art paper industry, which lasted over 20 years. My jobs as a mill representative and a product manager for several different art paper companies involved travel all over the U.S. and internationally. This was one aspect of my paper industry career that I thoroughly enjoyed. While on business trips, I always traveled with my camera and my harmonicas. My after-hours time was filled with discovery of the local live music scene in dozens of American cities and a few in Europe as well. Along the way, I was able to find subject material for my paintings. Although I enjoyed my day job, it was these evening sojourns that I loved the most. Maybe it took a close call with death to cause me to reflect deeply on who I am. In 1992, a diagnosis of non-Hodgkin lymphoma caused me to reflect on what was really important in life. During my battle with cancer, I became acutely aware of the fragility and shortness of life. When faced with a life-threatening disease, one tends to think more about what is truly important in life. The perspective of most cancer patients tends to be very clear about what is really important and what is not. I had plenty of time to think about this during chemotherapy as I watched the slow drip of cancer-fighting chemicals flowing into my veins. I attempted to wash away all the distracting details of daily existence and to focus on the essential stuff of life. I figured out the three most important things in my life: someone to love, someone to love me, and meaningful work to do. It took me a long time, but by 1999, I had finally found happiness with someone to love and someone to love me. I married Allison Harrington in Hillsdale, New York in 2000. The third item on my short list of priorities, meaningful work to do, remains somewhat elusive. I had a good job, one that paid well and allowed me to be creative in developing new products and marketing plans. I also had the opportunity to work with some great people on a national and international level. Still, there was something missing. Despite my successful business career, I had always defined myself first and foremost as an artist. Ever since I was a little boy, I have loved to draw. Making images was what I was best at and what gave me the most pleasure in life. In late 2005, a confluence of events occurred that caused me to lose my job as a product manager. I had lost jobs in the past, but this was a major setback for me. I was deeply saddened by what I perceived as a failure on my part. I went back to the business world briefly as an independent rep for another company. However, that did not work out either. I'm not sure what you would call it, fate, divine intervention, or the universe telling me what I should be doing with my life, but I felt that time was slipping away and I needed to get on with being who I really am before it was too late. I began to pursue my art career in earnest. I have always made art. However, it was time to really focus not only on my art, but what I could do to make the world a better place. I had a great career working for the man, but now it was time to work on myself. With all my experience as a businessman and a part-time artist, I felt that I had something meaningful to offer as an educator. To give something back through teaching, I decided to go back to school to get the necessary education and credentials to do that. I also was mindful of the fact that starting a new career in midlife as an artist was a shaky proposition. I felt that teaching art would give me meaningful work to do, and I needed a regular paycheck. After getting my MED degree, I was able to land a high school art teaching job, but as luck or fate would have it, budgets for art teaching in schools are also part of Vanishing America. The art teaching job I got was cut, and I was once again out of a job. Funny how life sometimes doesn't go how you plan. But ever since my days as a cancer patient, I'd been thinking that being an artist was what I was put on this earth to do. It sure seemed that life was telling me to do this. I decided that my mission should be to make art. The road is my muse and my window into the soul of America. I wanted to make art that was about the same uniquely American experience that I had decided upon 40 years ago, except that now my subject matter was harder and harder to find. Changing times and the corporate homogenization of the American roadside had made much of this country look the same, regardless of where one is. On the road and in life, we can find new meaning around every corner. I was finding that my mission as an artist was taking on broader cultural and anthropological significance. The images of America that I paint are also a way of preserving a part of America that was experienced by my generation. I hope that future generations can get some sense of the particular time and place that I was moved to preserve in paint. We need to preserve the good about 20th century America for future generations. Preserving a vanishing part of America is meaningful work. Let's give young people a sense of 20th century America. Of course, what I do is extremely personal. The images I choose to make are the result of my individual experience. That said, I feel that what I'm doing is larger than me. An entire generation has walked these streets, checked into these motels, and sipped coffee in these diners. Sometimes people ask me why there are no people in most of my paintings. There are probably psychological reasons for this that I'm not able to articulate. However, one reason is that as soon as you depict a human in a picture, the subject of the picture becomes that person. My subjects are deeply personal, but they're also universal. Every viewer brings their own experience to looking at my work. Aside from that, the humanity in my work is inherent in the places. They may be devoid of people, but they are full of humanity. The places we inhabit tell a story of who we are. I am interested in communicating a particular sense of place or a certain feeling that goes beyond words in my art. One of my artistic heroes, Edward Hopper, said, "If I could put it into words, I wouldn't have to paint it." The artist Alberto Giacometti said, "The object of art is not to reproduce reality, but to create a reality of the same intensity." I like that statement a lot. I'm not trying to reproduce reality in my art, I'm just trying to make good art. It's impossible to view my work without the cultural implications. However, I want to make images that I consider strong as art for art's sake. In other words, just good paintings. Life is short, art is long. In today's world, we are subjected to an avalanche of images in our daily life. They are now mostly produced and consumed in electronic digital formats. The pixelated image is a wonderful thing, but it's ephemeral. In a world where everyone is making images with great ease and instant realization, my images are produced very slowly. The labor-intensive nature of my work mandates that each image is very carefully considered before ever committing paint to canvas. I've chosen a slow process in a fast world. It is also something that's coming from a tradition as old as humanity. In fact, making art is one of the defining characteristics of humanity. No other species makes art. It says that we were here, and so much more. Yes, I'm painting Vanishing America, but my paintings will be around for a long time. My generation has walked through these doors. We have traveled these roads, and I have made these images so that future generations will be able to appreciate the America that I once knew.